Hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ask the Lawyers. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com. Today we're going to ask about divorce. Divorce is a difficult situation that many of us have dealt with, and luckily today we have as a guest attorney Kelli Hooper of KBH Law in Fayetteville, Georgia, serving the greater Atlanta area. And Kelli is here, going to give us some tips, hopefully make the whole process a little less painful. Kelli, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about the finances. When it comes to someone comes to you and they're considering divorce, what are some of the more common financial concerns they tell you about? What do you hear from people?
Well, generally, most people come to me and they think that the other spouse has some squirreled away money. I mean, that's like the number one thing that people talk about. They also are concerned about how they're going to survive post-divorce. You know, generally, if it's a two-income home, and all of the bills and you know, all the assets and debts are generally handled in one particular manner. Many times there are questions about what things will look like post-divorce. For instance, people will ask, well, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How will I continue to pay for tuition for college-age children? You know, just those sorts of things. A lot of times people are tied to the homes. It's usually the most significant asset that a married couple might have. But not only that, but it also dictates where the children go to school. And so a lot of times people are worried about, if I have to sell my home, then what happens to my children's education? Will they be able to stay in the school district that I'm sort of invested in?
It's a very complicated process, it sounds like.
It is. It is.
Now, if someone's concerned about the cost of the divorce, are there ways, do you have tips for people as far as how to save money as they're going through the process?
Well, I mean, I think that it sort of requires having a good conversation with your attorney before you get started. Try to get a litigation budget, or at least an understanding of how you'll be charged and what you'll be charged for. And most attorneys can provide some guidance on ways that you can save money. So I generally tell my clients, you know, when I ask you for documents, go ahead and provide them to me pretty quickly. I usually give them a homework list and ask them to provide things as we're getting started. And many times what I'm asking for makes 0 sense to the client, right? They're like, why in the world does she need, you know, 3 months of pay stubs and my tax return from last year? But as it turns out, if the client provides those documents, then generally I don't have to come back and ask questions or ask follow-up questions, which at the end of the day will save the client money. And so usually if a client is very responsive to the request of the attorney, then they can save themselves a lot of money.
So organization is important. I imagine sometimes people come in and they have no idea what their financial paperwork is, or how to provide you with that information.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I like to start out real slow. Like, I really do have a homework list that I provide to people. And in it, I ask for very specific things. And it's because over the years, I know that, you know, if someone provides me, for instance, a military member, if they provide me their leave and earning statement, I can pretty much get all the information that I need in order to, you know, file a petition for divorce or be able to answer. Or if it's, you know, someone else and they can provide me, you know, their IRA breakdown, if they have one account where they're handling all their IRAs and all their financial information, and they can get me that printout, I can generally answer most questions that I need and just have to then check with the client to confirm numbers and that sort of thing. I think a lot of times people will end up spending more money than they'd like in divorces because of documents, having to sort of generate a bunch of documents, and then also becoming intractable on issues that the attorney may think, you know, you can sort of move on from, but they get stuck sort of with issues or topics.
Is that sometimes because emotion gets involved and takes over?
Oh, absolutely. And I usually will have a conversation with my client and ask them, you know, I mean, is this the hill that you want to die on? Is this, you know, it's going to cost you X number of dollars potentially to investigate this matter, to get it to its very end. And so long as you're comfortable with the cost, I'm down. Like, let's go and do it. But you need to understand that if we spend, you know, an extraordinary amount of time trying to find out whether or not there are hidden assets, that if the assets aren't there, then you'll have really spent a lot of money looking for something that potentially isn't there.
What if a couple has a joint account? All their funds are in a joint account. Can one spouse remove money from that account before filing for divorce in anticipation of paying for the attorney that way? What is your recommendation?
Possibly. So I think the operative question is when those funds are taken out of a joint account. Any expenditures prior to filing are, of course, sort of like not dictated by any rules of the court or any rules of litigation. Here in Georgia, we have what's called a standing order that talks about how couples can basically handle assets and debts and that sort of thing during the pendency of a divorce. So you have to be very careful after things have filed not to start segregating funds or selling assets or moving things around, because that would be in violation of what we call it here in Georgia our standing order. And you can get yourself into trouble doing that sort of thing.
After the filing is done, but beforehand, there's no...
Yes. Certainly the standing order attaches as soon as something is filed.
What if one spouse doesn't have access to the financial records? They're not on the account or whatever. What's the workaround there?
Well, then you engage in what's called mandatory discovery. In particular counties here in Georgia, like Fulton County, which is our largest county, there's mandatory discovery where the couple is required by the court to produce 3 months of pay stubs, tax returns, fill out what's called the domestic relations financial affidavit, which is really a financial snapshot of the finances of the parties. And going through that discovery, you can generally find out the information that you need. Sometimes the production of those documents then opens up other lines of inquiry. If you were to notice going through the domestic relations financial affidavit that there's a bank account that you didn't know of, then you can then send subsequent discovery to find out about what's in that account and who does it belong to. I've done several cases, honestly, within the last several months where there was hidden assets. And, I tell the client that, we're going to go on a sort of this expedition to find these dollars. And hopefully they're there and it's what you think is there. Generally, if people have an inkling that there's some missing money, generally they're right, though. Generally, they're right.
Now, sometimes in a couple, one person or the other doesn't have a job or stays at home as a stay-at-home parent. Oftentimes it's the wife. What in that situation? They don't have their own income to pay for an attorney in the divorce. What are their options?
Well, there are two different options. Several different options, but the two major options are to ask the court in a temporary hearing to go ahead and ask the other side to pay attorney's fees. And so I've had several cases where, the non-working party makes the first appearance in court, tells the court that they feel like they need to have an attorney, and the other party and request that the other party pay a lump sum certain so that they can hire an attorney. We also have a provision in the domestic relations statutes here in Georgia where you can ask for attorney's fees at the very end. So reimbursement really of what you paid for an attorney, especially when there's a disparity in the incomes between the parties. So if there's a moneyed spouse and a non-moneyed spouse, there's an actual statutory provision that allows for you to ask for attorney's fees at the very end, simply based on the fact that there's a disparity on the income.
I know the laws vary state by state. What is the law in Georgia as far as, do you have to have an attorney to file for divorce? What are the rules?
No, I mean, that's the great thing about our legal system, right? Is that you're not required to have counsel. Now, as a good lawyer, I would always recommend that someone meet with an attorney and at least have some consultation prior to jumping into litigation, especially if we're talking about, kids and property and assets and that sort of thing. There's an old, well, he's not an old judge now, but there was a judge in Fulton County years ago that used to tell the story about pro se parties. And he would say that, when you're a pro se party, which means that you're not represented by counsel, that people generally assume that you know what you're doing. And he used to liken it to wrestling a bear. And so he'd say, when you're not represented by an attorney and you walk into court, it's like walking into a ring where you've agreed to wrestle a bear. And if you hop in the ring and you start wrestling around with the bear and you get beat up, no one's going to look and say, oh, well, it's too bad you got hurt. People are going to say, you got into the ring with the bear. So in this instance, I would always recommend that someone at least talk to an attorney about their case, at least get a feel for what they're jumping into before they get started.
But they don't always have to end up in court. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Most cases don't. I mean, cases certainly will be filed, but whether or not you actually have to appear in front of a judge depends on, of course, the tone and tenor of the litigation. If it's a settled matter where, the couple has sat down and they've come to an agreement on all issues, then it's just a matter of someone filing and then getting those documents walked through the court. If you're in a case where, there's a dispute about everything, then you can expect that you'll be in front of a judge.
Well, even just in the short time we've talked today, it's obviously a complicated process. To have somebody like yourself who's an expert certainly seems a smart thing to do.
Yeah, you don't want to wrestle with a bear.
That's right. Thank you so much for your time today. I think you've helped a lot of people. I sure do appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
All right. We thank you for joining us. And if you want more information about divorce and divorce proceedings and about my guest, attorney Kelli Hooper of KBH Law in Fayetteville, Georgia, visit AskTheLawyers.com, or you can get in touch with Kelli by calling the number on the screen. That's it for this episode of Ask the Lawyers. Please take a sec to click on our subscribe button on the screen so you don't miss any future episodes. I'm Rob Rosenthal for AskTheLawyers.com.